There's a lot of despair and anxiety circulating post-presidential election, and it's not unfounded. We are standing on the precipice of what not only promises to be, but what we've been promised will be a very dark time in our nation's history. Now more than ever, we're going to need each other to stand in solidarity with one another, to be allies to other communities, to bear witness, and to resist harm that may be planned against our neighbors, friends, and fellow humans. As the daughter and sister of immigrants from Mexico, one of the things that brings me comfort in this moment is knowing that there are organizations that have been preparing for this outcome. Groups that are ready to organize and resist any harms that may be coming our way. And that is how we will get through, by standing together, by showing up for one another, by holding on to our shared humanity, and by fighting for and with each other. For more than 40 years, the National Immigration Law Center, or NILC for short, has been one of the leading organizations defending and advancing the rights of immigrants. I want to talk about what NILC is doing to prepare for the months and years ahead. So we're having a special post-election conversation with Kica Matos, president of NILC. This is the NILC Freedom to Thrive podcast, powering pro-immigrant narratives, one story at a time. I'm Victoria Ballesteros, Executive Vice President of Narrative at the National Immigration Law Center. Kica, hello. Thank you for making time to have this conversation with me today. I know that you, as the president of the National Immigration Law Center, must have your hands absolutely full. Your plate must be overflowing in this time. And I really wanted to have this conversation with you because of the moment in which we find ourselves, in everything that I know that I'm hearing, that you must also be hearing from people who are immigrants, who are family members of immigrants, or who care about immigrants and who care about justice in this country. And I wanted to hear your words of wisdom on, what's analysis of what's happening and what we can look forward to in the months and years to come. And how would you start, Kica, again, just so immediately post-election, with immigration having been one of the defining, if not the defining issue of this presidential election? What are your thoughts and reflections so immediately after the outcome?
Thank you for inviting me, Victoria, and thank you for the questions. I will say, first and foremost, that the last 48 hours have been really intense. A lot of texts, a lot of phone calls, a lot of questions, a lot of shock, particularly for people who are immigrants and or are in undocumented or in mixed status families, wondering what to do. The issue around the election, and I really want to make the distinction because some of what we've been hearing also is recriminations and a lot of finger pointing and a lot of blame.
Yeah.
And the analysis is that it was immigration. My answer is it was the economy at the end of the day, although immigration was the tool that Trump used to demonize immigrants and to blame somebody and to make these threats. But what we heard overwhelmingly from people is that their biggest concern was the economy. And here's something hopeful and something that we should all hang on to. And this was actually televised in Fox News and a number of other outlets, which is that the election eve poll asked the question, one of the questions was whether people supported a pathway to citizenship for people, for immigrants who are undocumented, and the majority of Americans said yes. Right? They supported a path to legalization over deportations, and that is something that we should hold on to. Now, having said that, we are going to be facing some really tough times for the immigrant community. We've been there before, right? We know what Trump plans to do, and because of that, for the last 10 months, NILC is one of the organizations that's been doing scenario planning. We've looked at what they're threatening to do, and we have put together plans. So we are ready, and we intend to do everything we can to fight with and for immigrant communities. We will not surrender to the threats of this administration. We have a constitution that needs to be respected. We have tools at our disposal to fight with and for justice and for vulnerable communities.
So, Kika, you talked about voters being in support of a pathway to citizenship, um, despite voting in the way that they might have done. What is a pathway to citizenship? What does that mean? What does it look like? And why don't we have it now?
So, pathway to citizenship, when you hear that, it's really a short term way for describing people who are in this country without papers. We sometimes refer to them as undocumented immigrants, and undocumented immigrants are usually the result of people whose visas expire, for example, and they're unable to get their visas renewed, and so they choose to stay in this country, or people who have crossed the border and sought asylum and been denied asylum, and they have chosen to stay in the country. Those are some examples of how people fall out of status and become undocumented. Our immigration system is just broken. And the last time that Congress went about the business of trying to reform our immigration system and modernize it was in 1986 under Ronald Reagan. Think about
Wow.
that. And as a result of that, we have not been able to pass laws to offer these undocumented immigrants a pathway to citizenship. And so, right now, because of that, we have an estimated 11 million people who, on average, have lived in the country for about 15 years, 1 5, who are unable to change their status. It's not because they're too lazy to, it's not because they don't want to. It is not any of the stereotypical responses that we hear. It is because there is no pathway for them absent changes in the law.
Yeah. What would you say then, to someone who's feeling despair about where we're headed under this administration?
Yeah, here's what I'm acknowledging. We're all going through, those of us who care deeply about justice, those of us who care deeply about our democracy, those of us who care deeply about vulnerable populations in this country. We're all shocked at the outcome of the election. And, I would capture it as this. Some of us are saying, this is not my America. This is not the America that I have had faith in and that I believe in. And that translates into the stages of grief in whatever order, right? You process grief. We are right now in the moment where people are angry, they're depressed, they feel great amounts of despair and rage. And it's okay to feel those things. But at some point in time, we go through that and we pick ourselves up and we commit ourselves to waging the battle of our lifetimes. And this battle is not just to protect vulnerable populations, it is also a battle to save and protect our democracy. So we should draw inspiration from all over the country and even in this country in terrible moments to say there are moments in history where it feels like um, everything's going to hell in a handbasket, right? And we have to draw the inspiration from the freedom fighters, those who said we will not accept these conditions and we're going to do everything we can to fight for justice and to fight for democracy. So what I would say to people is, whatever source of inspiration you have, whatever heroes you are inspired by, whatever moment in history you can look at to say, wow, it felt like that moment in history was particularly difficult, right? And then these freedom fighters stepped forward and fought. Draw your inspiration from that, and then commit yourself to fighting for justice for the next 4 years, because that is what saved us the last time. And that is what will save us this time around.
Yeah, we need our community. We need our allies. We need folks to be in solidarity. You mentioned, Kika, and this is another really important point that I don't want to gloss over. You mentioned that voters support, even still today, a pathway to citizenship and support that over deportation. That is critically important because this country has just elected a president who has promised to embark on he's characterized it in a number of different ways, but in a mass deportation operation. It feels like there's a dissonance there, but it is very encouraging and promising that folks support a pathway to citizenship. Do you think, to put you on the spot here, do you think that is realistic? Do you think there is hope in the next administration for anything like that to move forward, or even anything close to it, even incrementally? Is that a fair question, or is too soon to tell?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. Not with the trifecta that we have,
Yeah,
right? And by that I mean we have a Republican president, a majority Republican Senate, and likely a majority Republican House. So the hope for any kind of law that would provide a pathway to citizenship is is it will be impossible. It's next to none, right? But the reason I mention that is because that to me is an indication of how Americans ultimately stand on issues affecting and pertaining to the undocumented population, right? And here's one of the things that I really want to say to people who voted for Trump and who said the economy was the reason that they voted for Trump. Um, this nation's economy runs on the backs of immigrants. And so any effort to engage in mass deportation is going to affect the bottom line and the dollars that people benefit from. And so our economy will likely collapse if these deportations are carried out. And so it is incumbent on us to ring the alarm bells and make sure that people understand. But the other thing that people need to understand is that you don't know who's undocumented, right? Most of us don't know who's undocumented. And so and I really, quite frankly, think people just don't think about it.
right.
But as we think about the future, I want people to remember at the end of the day, and all of us should keep our minds thinking about this piece of the puzzle, which is that the vote for Trump to me was not a vote for mass deportation and a vote for the terrible things that he's threatening to do to immigrants. It was a vote about the economy. But the Americans who voted for Trump voted against their own self-interest
Yeah.
because of the tremendous contributions that immigrants make to our nation's economy.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic, right? That we could spend hours trying to unpack. How is NILC preparing? What is the National Immigration Law Center doing? How is NILC preparing for whatever is to come?
So we've been at this now for 11 months and we finished our scenario plans last week, and they are really detailed and they are really exhaustive. But here's a few things that I will say. We are planning to use the law as a tool to fight on behalf of immigrants, but that's not the only thing we're doing, right? We successfully used the law the last time, and we will use the law again. So our brilliant, dedicated lawyers have been thinking through what our legal strategies are and what our targets of attack are going to be. We are an organization that is also deeply aligned with the immigrant rights movement. And so we plan to be a part of the broader efforts of the immigrant rights movement to engage in advocacy. And what am I talking about? Recall the Muslim ban and the airport activism, right? That slowed down the machinery, right? It was when Americans went to the airport and spoke out and said, this is not the America that we believe in,
Yeah,
that we realized that the tools of mass resistance are critical. And
yeah,
so we plan to mobilize millions of Americans from all walks of life during critical moments. The family separation was another one when Americans spoke out because they were so repulsed by what they were seeing. So mass mobilization and grassroots organizing is something that we plan to do. Um, Victoria, you put it so beautifully, and you have said it repeatedly, which is that we have absolutely got to be all about narrative change, because the reason we are where we are is because we have not done enough to use culture and the arts, right, on all of those mediums to change hearts and minds.
Yeah.
So we have to slow down and stop and incorporate that into our work moving forward, because unless and until we're intentional about changing hearts and minds and using tools that we haven't used before,
Yeah.
we will be in this very place 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now. And so that's another piece of the work that we are taking really seriously.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel better hearing that. So, okay, let's talk about this mass deportations again, which, even
Mhm.
just yesterday, I'm hearing these plans of doing this on day one, right? Of the next administration, and day one is not that far off. So this is what I think is causing a lot of concern and a lot of chatter around what can people do, how can people prepare, is there anything that people can do to prepare, and where can people go to get information to find community around that.
The first thing we really need to do is mass education, know your rights. And so if you go on Nilk's Instagram account, you will come across a very well written, very understandable set of slides
Yeah.
that walk you through what your rights are. So if you're an immigrant in this country, particularly if you're undocumented, you need to know what your rights are, right? Because the Constitution protects everybody's right. And so, what are the things? And I'll just quickly run through them even here, right? What are the four big takeaways that we want everybody to know? You have the right to remain silent. So, if you're speaking to immigration officers, you don't have to answer the questions. You can simply say that you're choosing to remain silent. If an ICE agent comes to your door, you do not have to open it. Do not open that door, right? Recall that an ICE agent has to have a warrant signed by a judge, and you have no obligation to open your door unless an ICE agent shows you a warrant. The other thing to know is that you have the right to speak to a lawyer, right? So, any questions, anything you say, I want to speak to my lawyer. The other thing is, before you sign anything, right, you might be coerced. If you do end up in conversation with an ICE agent and they try to coerce you to sign papers, do not sign anything, because you could be signing away your rights. So make sure that you have a really good understanding of whatever document is being put in front of you before you even consider signing it. And I quite frankly wouldn't sign anything unless I spoke to a lawyer. And then the last thing, well, actually, two more things. Take your immigration documents that you have, any valid immigration documents, and make sure that you have it with you. Do not carry your foreign passports with you. And if you are a parent and you're worried that ICE might arrest you, and if you do encounter an ICE officer who's threatening to arrest you, let them know that you have children, right? Because ICE could exercise discretion and let you go. And then finally, in our Instagram page, there's a card that you should carry with you, right? Because in moments of panic, if an ICE officer or Customs and Border Patrol comes to you, right, you're not going to remember all of these things, but you
Right.
might remember that, oh, in my wallet, I have this card. Let me go ahead and grab it. The Know Your Rights right now on our Instagram account are only in English, but we're having them translated into Spanish and probably other languages. So do check out our website, and our Instagram account on our websites will be places to go to for basic information.
Beautiful. So there are things people can do, things people can know right now and share with their communities and their families and their loved ones. And it's at NILK on Instagram and nilk.org on the website. Wonderful. One last question, because I feel like this is also an issue that's coming up. There are folks who are feeling like, well, I'm not an immigrant, so this isn't going to affect me. And you've already spoken about, to the
Still will.
economy. Yeah, I'm really curious your thoughts on people who think that because they're not immigrants, these issues, these actions won't affect them.
Let me lay out some. I'm going to just focus on a few things just to explain and to make sure that people understand that it will affect you, right? Directly or indirectly, it will affect you. We've already talked about the possible economic collapse of many segments
Yeah.
of our economy because they rely on immigrant labor, right? But let me also talk about some of the things that uh, Trump wants to do. He wants to use the military to carry out deportations. Imagine being in your house or apartment and hearing rumbling down the street and opening up the door or looking out the window and seeing these massive tanks or military trucks and seeing military get out of their trucks, bang on somebody's door, right? And seeing the military engaging in deportations in your block, on your street. And then you realize, oh my God, I know that person.
Yeah.
That is the woman who babysits my child. That is the woman who I have bought food from. That is a woman that who has children whose children play with my kids,
Yeah.
right? So using the military to carry out deportations means that also in whatever community you're in, you will see military tanks and military cars in your community for no reason other than their job will be to arrest and drag citizens away. That should horrify all of us. And that is going to be everywhere in every community in this country, right? There is also the possibility that they will ban immigrant kids from attending public schools. So think about the impact of that,
Wow.
right? K to
Yeah.
12, right? You may start seeing immigrant kids, right, with nothing to do and nowhere to go during the day because they will no longer have access to an education. Or
Yeah.
think about a heartbreak where you ask somebody, some kid, somebody, can you help me out? I don't see well. I don't have my glasses on. What does that sign say? And to hear that child say, I can't help you because I don't know how to read,
Yeah.
right? Because I have been denied access from attending school. Um, think about workplace raids, right? If you work in a big organization or a big place of work and all of a sudden you see immigration and customs enforcement, right? And they don't do this gently, right?
Yeah.
Overtaking your place of work, brutalizing people who they believe, and this always engages, there's always a racial element to it. Tennessee raids were an example. White people got separated from people of color, and all of the people of color were subject to processing.
Yeah.
Show me your papers. It is entirely possible that your place of work will be subject to a raid. And finally, family separation. There will be some families, right, whose parents will be separated from their kids and their parents will disappear and their children will be left behind. So, this idea that the rest of us, right, those of us with the privilege of citizenship or those of us who are somehow protected, that it won't affect us, it will affect every single person in this country. So right now there are these policies in place that prohibit immigration and customs enforcement from carrying out raid in what they consider to be sensitive locations, and those are
Okay.
hospitals and clinics and schools and places of worship. This new administration is likely to completely do away with those sensitive locations. So it may be possible that you're at a clinic or you're at a hospital waiting for your appointment, right? Or you're in the emergency room because you twisted your ankle or something happened to you, right? And you will see, or you will be at school dropping your child off, and you will see customs enforcement carrying out brutal, terrible raids. Or you're worshiping on a Sunday, and all of a sudden, immigration and customs enforcement interrupts your worship to drag people away, right? That is the brutality of what we're talking about. And so, what I would say is, those are the things that will affect everybody.
Yeah.
It is incumbent on all of us to rise up and push back. And every single person who is listening and watching this podcast has to become a part of the resistance. And so, I'm pleading and begging people to become a part of the resistance and do everything you can to fight for and protect your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues, your immigrant brothers and sisters.
That is terrifying and shocking that we've come to this place. Kika, do you have thoughts, ideas, suggestions for people who want to stand in solidarity with those of us working in the immigrant rights space, or solidarity with immigrants, with their neighbors, their friends? What can people do?
I will first direct them to our website, right? Go to our website, send us a note that you want to volunteer. We will do one of two things. If you are, for example, a lawyer and want to do pro bono work for us, we will put you to good use. If you are in a specific community and you want to do local community work, we will share that information with immigrant rights organizations in the particular state. You also want to just Google immigrant rights organizations in your locality. So I encourage you to reach out to NILC, but also Google, let Google be your friend. Look for local organizations that do this work and reach out to them and say that you want to volunteer and you want to be a part of the efforts of the resistance, because there are efforts right now to recruit volunteers so that we are ready on day one to protect our communities.
And I'm going to add one. Donate if you can. If you're in a position
Yes, please
to,
donate. Yes.
throw in a few bucks. The kind of work that NILC and other organizations do, including litigation, as you mentioned, litigation is very expensive. It is long-term work. But all of the work of organizing, of doing advocacy, of filing lawsuits, and just all of it is very expensive. And so for those who are in a position to donate, I think that is another important and powerful way to get involved. And again, I'm going to repeat this many, many, many times over the next coming months and years. NILC.org is a place that you can go for more information. You can donate. You can sign up for emails to stay in the loop on breaking updates, and follow NILC on social media at NILC. Is there anything
Yeah,
else that you
Victoria,
want
let
to
me
share and
say,
add?
yeah,
Yeah.
let me quickly, yes, the last point, which is, I really just want to emphasize that we do not take government funds. We are a nonprofit organization that relies on voluntary donations from individuals. And part of the reason we were successful in fighting off the worst excesses of the first Trump administration is that people gave it so generously. They realized the crisis of the moment, and people opened up their wallets and their checkbooks and made contributions to NILC. So I would ask those of you who are in a position to be as generous as you can in supporting our work. So we have a webpage for the donate place. So click on the donate, and if you can, we really would welcome your support.
I want to thank our listeners for spending time with us. For more immigration truths, visit us at nilc.org and freedomtothrive.com. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. I look forward to continuing this conversation with all of you.